like 50 to 60% damage range, and Fake Tears takes it over the top.
Yeah, it can absolutely blow up Pokemon as we head into this Game 1. Double Ogerpon on the field. It's Wellspring Ogerpon for Giovanni Costa and Hearthflame Ogerpon for Raghav Malaviya. They also have the Incineroar on the field going up against the Fluttermane that Gio has brought out with that booster speed. Of course, has access to Icy Wind to lower the speed and get the Wellspring Ogerpon faster than the Hearthflame. But other than that, two very standard leads for both of these players.
Yeah, relatively conservative position here for both sides, I feel like, where certainly the Wellspring Ogerpon's not too upset about facing down two Fire-type Pokemon, but also while it's intimidated, not likely to pop off too hard immediately here. And Farigiraf coming in, Gio's pivoting a little bit.
Yeah, Gio is pivoting in the Farigiraf, hoping to block a Fake Out from Incineroar, but instead Raghav will just retreat Incineroar in favor of Rillaboom. So is blocking the Fake Out from Incineroar, but also will block Fake Out from the Rillaboom on the next turn, provided that Farigiraf can survive through this turn. And it looks like we are going to see our first Terastallization here on turn 1. That's actually going to be the Wellspring Ogerpon, going to remove the grass typing, become pure water, up against two Fire-type Pokemon, would be resisting any Fire-type attacks coming out, but now it's actually up against two Grass-type Pokemon, the Rillaboom and the opposing Hearthflame Ogerpon. However, the Ivy Cudgel will connect with the Hearthflame Ogerpon, gets a boost because of the Terastallization, but the Intimidate doing a lot of work as Raghav fires off an Ivy Cudgel of their own into Farigiraf, deals about 50% hit points to the Giraffe on the switch-in, but not enough to pick up the one-hit KO.
Sort of a fun, awkward spot now. Not just the Fake Out being stopped by the Farigiraf, but because of the grassy terrain. Also, any grassy glides not going to work so well while the Farigiraf's on the field. But both sides probably going to play a little conservatively here, as threatened, or not going to be threatened on both sides.
Well, another Ivy Cudgel into the Hearthflame Ogerpon, into the Spiky Shield this time around. So Raghav protecting their Ogerpon, and the U-turn actually picks up the KO on Farigiraf, which means that Gio is losing a key piece of his team, something that was extremely important in that San Antonio finals, and Raghav gets to reposition. Has the option to bring back in the Incineroar and stack another Intimidate onto the Ogerpon, which is what they will do, and also shows the Urshifu in the back, as Gio now gets to see the Pokemon that Raghav has pivoted in and choose what else will come out.
Yeah, it's a big Intimidate, too. We see now with the damage there, certainly would be able to survive another Ivy Cudgel on his own Ogerpon. Maybe not so easy to do with Fluttermane there, potentially. Able to add a little bit more damage and avoid that happening, but really well positioned by Raghav. They've done a great job of kind of just slowly picking advantages there. Really easy knockout without really giving too much up.
Yeah, and now that the Farigiraf is off the field, there is no Armor Tail, which means that the Hearthflame Ogerpon is unlocked to go for Grassy Glides, and the Incineroar is unlocked to go for Fake Outs. As a result, Gio will be pivoting into his final Pokemon, which is a Gholdengo, as the Fluttermane will protect. Again, that was a booster speed Fluttermane, so not a lot of not as much offensive pressure as we are used to seeing from the Fluttermane. That Protect will be very useful. Actually catches both attacks from Raghav, the Grassy Glide and the Flare Blitz. So the Gholdengo actually coming in for free here, and that is a Choice Specs Gholdengo running Make It Rain, Shadow Ball, Focus Blast, and Power Gem, which actually looks pretty good against these two Fire-type Pokemon.
Yeah, not the greatest type advantage or type matchup in the world on the surface, but yeah, I mean, that Power Gem, not a move we see a whole lot, but it could be a great choice here. Moonblast coming in first and not doing too much.
Well, Gio did not go for speed control from Icy Wind. Instead, lets Gholdengo take an Ivy Cudgel from the Ogerpon on Raghav's side. But the combination of Power Gem and Moonblast will KO the Incineroar. So Raghav's Incineroar is off the field, and Gio has been able to preserve both of the Pokemon here on the field, but took a lot of damage on Gholdengo in return.
Yeah, now we see with the Urshifu coming out here, really helps this positioning a little bit. Could threaten a potential knockout on this Gholdengo now, I guess, which couldn't protect anyway, but doubly can't protect in front of Urshifu. Or pressuring this Fluttermane. We saw how effective its Protect was previously. A little more difficult to do that now with Urshifu staring it down.
Yeah, and this Urshifu we have seen, I mentioned earlier that it's more of the standard old school Urshifu with the Mystic Water, but it's also running the updated Terra type here, running a Steel Terra, not the offensive Water typing, which means it will be able to defend itself from Fairy type attacks coming out from that Flutter Mane. Geo will be retreating. The Golden Go doesn't want to stay locked into Power Gem right now. Brings back in the Wellspring Ogerpon as the Terastallization comes through for Raghav. They will be Terastallizing their Urshifu into that Steel typing to resist any Fairy type or Ice type attacks even coming out from that Flutter Mane. So Moonblast no longer dangerous, but what is dangerous is this Grassy Glide from the Hearthflame Ogerpon. Almost picks up the KO on the Wellspring Ogerpon on the switch-in. Flutter Mane, not enough damage to get a KO with that Shadow Ball. Instead, going to be KO'd right back. 3 hits from the Surging Strikes is enough to do it. And that means that Geo has taken so much damage and was not able to pick up a KO in return.
Yeah, I think that's just been a really great game so far from Raghav. Picking up a bunch of damage, having fantastic positioning now, and a really low HP Ogerpon. We're about to see a very low HP Golden Go rejoin the field, and then also critically, the Grassy Terrain expiring here. I think maybe the one way you could imagine Geo crawling back into this one is getting Rillaboom back out before that Grassy Terrain expired, but we'll be able to reactivate that when it re-enters the field and allow potential AD priority moves, but might not be necessary here.
Yeah, no help needed from the Rillaboom as Aqua Jet picks up the KO on Golden Go. Ogerpon from Geo's side will try to answer with the Ivy Cudgel. Connects onto the Hearthflame Ogerpon, so we'll be able to pick up that KO. But again, like you mentioned, Rillaboom just gets to come back out here and has a great type matchup. Full health from the Rillaboom, able to easily clean up this game for Raghav and bring their hopes for day 2 and a victory over their rival from San Antonio one step closer to fruition.
Yeah, revenge is just a game away, and I really like both their team and how they played this one. There are just so many priority moves on this team, and picking up that quick knockout on Frigoraph I thought was just so important here, where it unlocked about half the moves, it feels like. But like on Raghav's team, I think on Geo's side, it's really important to protect Frigoraph better, or even just to not reveal your 4th Pokemon and don't bring it out, where when Raghav doesn't have to respect the Armor Tail anymore, I think it just makes the game so much easier for them. And I mean, can you mention how big it was in the finals before, or you see kind of what happens without it?
Yeah, and actually losing this Farigiraf is such a big deal because we see here that Geo had the Wellspring Ogerpon next to Farigiraf up against the Rillaboom and the Hearthflame Ogerpon on Raghav's side. And with the Farigiraf on the field, the Terastallized Ogerpon, Wellspring Ogerpon, is very safe because Hearthflame only has Grassy Glide, not running Woodhammer or Hornleech, only has Grassy Glide as Grass-type coverage. But by Raghav making an incredible play to pick off the Farigiraf with that U-turn and catching damage on the switch-in meant that Geo just wasn't able to protect his Pokemon anymore, and Raghav took a huge lead from that point and didn't let it go.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of that U-turn, I do think that's one thing that's really cool about both these teams. We've seen plenty of Parting Shot and Incineroar pivoting, but that U-turn paying dividends on Raghav's side of the field. Very important for them to have Rillaboom on or off the field at the right times. Getting that second Grassy Surge is really important. On the flip side, we actually see U-turn on Incineroar as well for Geo. I don't know if that'll actually come out and be a factor in this match or not, but we more often see that Parting Shot doesn't work with the item that this Incineroar has.
Well, there is Incineroar on the field for Geo. And yeah, the Assault Vest means that Geo has to run U-turn instead of the Parting Shot. But it's going to be Incineroar and Farigiraf staring down Urshifu and Incineroar for Raghav's side. Have to give the advantage to Geo here. It's the only person with access to Fake Out here and the ability to potentially set Trick Room with that Farigiraf.
Yeah, can definitely get it here if he wants it. And I think that's an interesting twist to this matchup as well. One thing that at least is good for Raghav, they're Urshifu able to protect something we don't see very frequently, but do you really just want to leave that out in the field and allow a Trick Room to happen, right?
Yeah.
Where probably not worth it. Going to have to absorb this Fake Out here for the team, allowing this Incineroar to do something here. Would be a big knockoff.
Ooh, that's a good knockoff into Farigiraf. The Intimidate being extremely important to preventing huge damage coming out from Farigiraf, but does knock off the Life Orb, which means the Psychic is not quite as powerful as it could be, but Farigiraf doesn't need it. Just picks up the KO straight up on that Urshifu, and that Pokemon has gone down. A major offensive threat reduced to rubble here from the Giraffe, and Geo has done much more with that Pokemon this time around than last time.
Yeah, and critically, it's still available, right? I think with no Trick Room occurring there, probably the play here is to get it off the field so you can keep threatening it. One of the advantages of the knockout there instead of attacking is, with all this priority, Trick Room may not do that much.
Well, Farigiraf protecting in the front of a Swords Dance from this Ogerpon. Raghav trying to punish some passive play from Geo. Will not be able to pivot out their own Incineroar, though, because the Protect will block that parting shot. Instead, Geo will just get to U-turn into the opposing Incineroar, and now sees the Swords Dance boosted Ogerpon on the other side, gets to choose a new Pokemon to come out, and it is Whimsicott showing up here.
So not a Pokemon we see a whole lot. If you've forgotten what Whimsicott has done, in its absence over the years, one of the things that it's very well known for is that Prankster Encore, which would be very effective against the Swords Dance here. It seemed like a very free Swords Dance, became much less so. Now it's a very tricky spot for Raghav, as not only have they lost a Pokemon, but they're being pinned by that cute little Pokemon.
Yep, forced to switch out immediately after getting a Swords Dance feels so bad, but instead, Rillaboom coming in to replace the Ogerpon as Raghav has to switch it out in the face of an Encore from the Whimsicott. Geo will go ahead and protect Farigiraf as well, keeping his options open, and gets a high value Intimidate off onto both the Rillaboom and Incineroar here. That Incineroar has now taken 2 Intimidates, so will not be able to deal as much damage as it may want to into either of these Pokemon especially. But here it is, the Terastallization on Whimsicott, going to become a Fire-type Pokemon. With that Urshifu off the field, Fire typing, Raghav has shown all 4 of their Pokemon can't break through this Pokemon now. Yeah,
Whimsicott could be very annoying. Snorlax can really use this move offensively, but now resisting this Flare Blitz, basically taking no damage with the help of its ally Incineroar, and this Whimsicott could be a nightmare. Unfortunately, Raghav's own grassy terrain now going to help heal this Whimsicott up, and do you really want to be chaining a bunch of fake outs in front of Whimsicott now, right? Inversely, the Incineroar on the other side of the field, you kind of have to fake it out because you really can't take Flare Blitzes on that side of the field.
Absolutely. Whimsicott will just go ahead and set up the Tailwind here, making sure that Geo has the speed advantage. Incineroar did take a fake out, and Raghav goes for the one opportunity to do big damage to Whimsicott, gets the knockoff, knocks off the Covert Cloak, but now knockoff is not going to be dealing as much damage as it was that last turn, because there is no more item on Whimsicott, and it took no damage.
Yeah, I would say we hesitate to call that big damage. Bigger damage, sure, but a little bit sad there. And now Incineroar kind of forcing a Flare Blitz. We're going to see 2 more supportive Pokemon, both opting to Terastallize to become Fire-type Pokemon, reduce the damage they take, and could see a slower game here, but Geo's got a pretty big lead.
Yeah, the counter here is that Whimsicott also is not able to deal that much damage back, and with a Fire Terastallization of their own, Raghav will be protecting the Rillaboom and Incineroar this time around from the Moonblast and the U-turn. Geo will be bringing in the Farigiraf, though, in favor of the Incineroar, so pivoting that Pokemon back in, and takes another U-turn, not quite enough to pick up the KO this time around thanks to that Intimidate. The Rillaboom will be retreating in favor of the Hearthflame Ogerpon. And now, Geo's Whimsicott will be resisting basically all of the damage here, but Ogerpon does have the ability, if it can ever get a chance to set up a Swords Dance without the threat of Encore, to start breaking through it. And, Raghav at least does have more damage available. Like the Pokemon remaining for Raghav are stronger than at least the Whimsicott and the Incineroar that we've seen so far.
Yeah, just such a strange situation here, right? Where neither side really in a position where they can do a whole lot of damage. Farigiraf, the most threatening Pokemon in the field in a sense, where at least it can do neutral damage to both these Pokemon. Missing its Life Orb, so not nearly as much as it could have before. And Raghav now probably wanting to attack into that further S slot, try to either get rid of it or the Pokemon in the back, but it's also just such an easy switch into the Incineroar, and you're right back where you started. I'll be curious to see how either side can position a way to actually deal some damage.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard for either player to start positioning to deal some damage, like you mentioned, which means you have to start thinking about time at this point. It seems very early on in this game to start thinking about going to time, but you really have to, because Geo, with the Pokemon advantage right now, able to preserve the Farigiraf, should we go to time, will be able to take a win if it remains 4-3. However, Geo is showing off one additional trick up his sleeve, which is the fake tears to allow for more damage from those Moonblasts or coming out from any Hyper Voices or Psychics from Farigiraf.
Yeah, it's sort of a fun situation. Like, can you somehow get in a position where you can actually land an attack onto a Pokemon that has been hit with fake tears? And maybe if you can't, right, can you take advantage of, like, well, now that I fake tears you have to switch to not take the bigger hit, so can I do something with that instead? Unfortunately, yeah, I mean, now that seemingly every Pokemon in this match is fire type, Moonblast not looking the most threatening either, so truly a strange position we found ourselves in here.
This is a really weird and awkward matchup here, but the Incineroar is taking neutral damage from the Moonblast, at least on Geo's side, which means that it's probably dealing slightly more Geo is probably slightly winning the damage war there. However, because that Incineroar is faster on the U-turn, that means that Geo will be bringing back in the Farigiraf and potentially risking a knockout here if Raghav was able to target down that slot. Raghav unfortunately did not, instead went for a knockoff into the Whimsicott, which was still dealing decent damage, I believe unintimidated at that point. So unintimidated and but without an item on the Whimsicott, dealing just about the same amount as intimidated and with an item.
Yeah, we'll have to keep track there. Also, critically, briefly, there is no grassy terrain. Looks like we're about to get it again, but you could temporarily go for a grass type attack while it is no longer priority boosted, but does not look like that's going to be the direction we go in here.
Yeah, well, Whimsicott finally forced off the field for the Incineroar to put another Intimidate back on the field against the Ogerpon and Incineroar. While Raghav will immediately be retreating their own Incineroar off the field for Rillaboom to bring the grassy terrain back. And, you know, I was actually kind of in the back of my mind noticing how quickly both of these players had been putting in their moves at the start of the game. I have to wonder if the pace of play will start to slow down as we continue to find ourselves in these types of situations.
Yeah, I mean, I think both sides, too, kind of have to think about where this match is going. One critical piece of information is that Geo knows his own Force Pokemon, obviously, but Raghav and we do not.
Right.
And I think that changes things a little bit here. I feel like he's playing a little recklessly with Farigiraf on purpose, where I think he probably wants a Pokemon to get knocked out and then to bring one of those stronger special attackers in relatively safely, although, you know, maybe not that safely with the threat of priority attack going the other direction. Really doesn't want to take any unnecessary damage on the switch, and this match is a little bit of a stalemate before we get to that position.
Well, another Pokemon switch from Geo, Whimsicott for the Farigiraf. The Cotton Ball on fire, back on the field. Geo will be able to take a turn of Fake Out here onto the Rillaboom, prevents that from moving, and the Ivy Cudgel into Whimsicott. That Ogerpon has actually taken a number of Intimidates at this point, so that Ivy Cudgel not dealing a lot of damage at all.
Yeah. Well, not normally, but I do think that's sort of a dangerous Pokemon to stall against, Joe. Ivy Cudgel does have that increased critical hit rate, right? If you let it roll enough times, it's going to crit you eventually. You know, maybe Whimsicott is the Pokemon that Geo wants to get knocked out rather than the Farigiraf in order to maintain that armor tail, so maybe it's not the worst thing. You know, Tailwind up here, and Ivy Cudgel crit might be great for Geo.
Yeah, Geo is trying, it seems like he might be trying to get a Pokemon off the field. No critical hits there. Instead, Whimsicott continuing to hold on. Big damage coming out from Geo's Incineroar, actually this time, knocking off the Assault Vest from the Rillaboom, and Whimsicott finally goes down on the turn where it set up the Tailwind. So this is probably the best opportunity to see what the final Pokemon is for Geo.
You know, that most traditional Tailwind strategy, using Tailwind on turn 27 in order to, after you give up the knockout. It is that Golden Go. So it all makes sense here, right? Where it helps explain why maybe Geo wasn't being the most conservative with Farigiraf, where, well, you resist grass anyways, like, does it really matter? But that Tailwind is big. You know, no more threat of fake tears, I guess, but you've got to imagine Geo not too upset about the situation. However, the critical hit a little bit scarier now. Don't want Golden Go being critical hit the way perhaps it wouldn't have mattered so much if it happened to Whimsicott.
Yeah, that being said, Golden Go is extremely safe here to fire off power gems into that Ogerpon slot. I mean, what's Raghav going to do? Switch to Incineroar and get knocked out from now that the Tailwind is set? So Geo being able to finally get Tailwind up and a free switch in for Golden Go, like you said. Very little damage coming out from that Grassy Glide as the Power Gem connects onto Ogerpon and picks up the one-hit KO. This Choice Specs Golden Go is ready to sweep here. It's going to be Incineroar and a Fire-type Rillaboom, and there is nothing Raghav can do about this Golden Go.
Yeah, it took us a long time to get here, but perfect setup. The Tailwind, the Golden Go out safely, and now Farigiraf going to rejoin his friend here. Probably not totally necessary, but, you know, just to add the style points, making sure nothing goes wrong, preventing any future priority attacks as long as it's available on the field.
Yeah, the most important thing about Farigiraf being on the field this turn means that it can switch out next turn for another Intimidate.
It's helping in its own special way. Certainly Golden Go not too concerned about getting faked out here either way, and yeah, just a fantastic game by Geo. Really slow played it after the first knockout, but that's a smart thing to do. You know, he's on the brink of elimination. You don't want to make a silly mistake and knock yourself out of a tournament. Instead, showing his poise, playing a really great game here. And what a fantastic situation we find ourselves in here, as both sides kind of decisively won a game. You know, fast decisively and slow decisively. And now both these players showing why they're so good, why they made it to that regional finals. And you know, it's all on the line in this final game.
Absolutely. We are headed into game 3 of our win-and-in match here. The winner of this next game will advance to next stage of the tournament. Day 2, we will see them tomorrow. It really comes down to this first turn where Geo was able to get a fake out and a psychic into Raghav's Urshifu without the threat of that water type damage that Raghav was threatening in turn 1. Geo was safe to terrestrialize Whimsicott into the fire type and then just sort of stall things out until Golden Go could come back in.
Yeah, I really like the game plan there where, I was like very conservative eventually, but the first bit was real. Okay, well, if I can get rid of this Urshifu, I win. Like, there's kind of no outs where I don't really know what Raghav could have done at that point to bust the game open. They were kind of just hosed at that point. And also, again, showing the power of the Power Gem on Golden Go. It's kind of your only option with choice. I guess you could use, Thunderbolt there, but realistically, I mean, why not? But yeah, I mean, we've kind of seen in the past teams taking advantage of the lack of ice resist on teams. Not very many rock resist on this team other than a couple of frail offensive Pokemon. So really helping out with the late game stall on that one. And on Raghav's side, it's sort of an interesting spot now. Like, all right, well, do I maybe pick another offensive Pokemon so I'm a little more able to exert more pressure, or do I just play more conservatively with the Urshifu this time?
Yeah, I mean, Raghav definitely would have been able to had the opportunity to preserve that Urshifu. Instead, went for an aggressive play on turn 1, something you can do when you already won the first game. Coming into game 3, have to imagine that Geo really showed how important that Urshifu was for Raghav, that they will have to try and protect it a little bit better. But Geo also making an adaptation here, bringing the Ogerpon Wellspring Mask Form out front, up against the Incineroar and Urshifu on Raghav's side. So Urshifu back out on the field, back threatening big damage immediately, but facing down the Wellspring Ogerpon as we are going straight into some switching and pivoting.
Yeah, I think Raghav was expecting exactly the lead to get there. Maybe both of them locking in so quickly there. Both of them perhaps have a game plan for this situation. The Insta-locks.
The Insta-locks in the switch to Rillaboom and a terrestrialization coming out on Raghav's side. Like we mentioned, the and also from the Wellspring Mask Ogerpon form from Geo's side, so big water type damage. Again, we saw the rock typing being super effective against a bunch of fire types in game 2. Water is also super effective against a bunch of fire types here.
Yeah, but also dropping that water absorb, where you'd assume with this terastallization that Gio's likely to go on the offense with this Urshifu terastallizing as well. Probably about to see it go on the offense, probably with a surging strike. So is Farigiraf going to go down immediately, just like in game 1?
Yeah, there's the steel typing coming out from the Urshifu, which it will allow it to resist the psychic type damage from Farigiraf and any grass type attacks coming out from the Ogerpon. Ogerpon trying to take out the Rillaboom, but instead, or trying to take out the Incineroar, but instead hits the Rillaboom. These surging strikes are Mystic Water boosted, but without the power of an offensive terastallization as well, will not be able to pick up the KO on Farigiraf, which gets to set up Trick Room.
Also interesting, so last game, Gio had that opportunity, but opted to avoid it, anticipating the Urshifu was not going to use the terastallization and pick up that cheeky knockout. This time, Urshifu does terastallize to defend itself, but Gio makes the right read as well, goes for the Trick Room instead of a Psychic that probably would have been game-losing there. So both sides still in it, both sides taking some ground there, but now Gio finds himself in a tricky spot where with Trick Room up, it's much more important to preserve this Farigiraf and maintain the actual speed advantage of Trick Room.
Yeah, and this steel-type Urshifu is so threatening to Gio's team right now. Being able to resist both Hyper Voice and Psychic from Farigiraf means it feels pretty safe. But Gio also has to switch out the Ogerpon, brings in the Golden Go, MVP from game 2, and a Hyper Voice from the Farigiraf deals decent damage to the Rillaboom, but not a whole lot because of the Assault Vest. And again, that terastallization from the Urshifu means that it takes pitiful damage from the Hyper Voice, as a Wood Hammer deals pretty decent damage, all things considered, to Golden Go on the switch-in, and Farigiraf has gone down.
So Gio will get the full opportunity to try to use his Trick Room here this time, but loses a Pokemon, so going to have to be concerned about the many priority boosted attacks from Raghav. And then also critically here, that Steel type, it was pretty good against the Pokemon out in the field before. Also going to help potentially deter a Make It Rain here, although Incineroar really helpful. Going to slow Rillaboom down significantly and not really going to be able to do anything to either of these Pokemon, and then also threaten Fake Out onto the Urshifu to make things a little bit easier for this Golden Go, at least for one more turn.
Yeah, now Fire-type damage is looking really powerful, as opposed to in Game 2, where it was looking extremely weak, threatening big Flare Blitzes onto either the Rillaboom or the Urshifu on Raghav's side. Instead, Raghav will try to limit the damage by switching in their own Incineroar to get an Intimidate off onto Gio's Incineroar, which is holding the Assault Vest item, so cannot protect and only has access to attacking moves. Incineroar will just go for a Fake Out, trying to block the Urshifu from an attack this turn. Instead, just into the Protect as Golden Go catches Incineroar on the switch-in with a Power Gem, but it is not quite enough to pick up the KO.
Oh, that would have been huge. I mean, it's still a big damage trade, but Incineroar, not the speediest Pokemon in the world, probably not going to be so upset about this Trick Room. And we're still in a very tenuous position here. I feel like the next knockout could be huge. Gio not quite able to do enough there. I don't know what the spot is now. Does Incineroar try to pick up a knockout? Be very dangerous for Gio to switch around here, but neither of these Pokemon can protect. So a little bit tenuous. What will happen?
I really want to have Farigiraf at this point to block that Fake Out, but there is no Farigiraf left on the field for Gio, which means that Raghav gets to go for a Fake Out for free. Gio will be protecting the Golden Go, identifies that Pokemon as the most important for his chances of victory, switches back in the Wellspring Ogerpon, gets the special defense boost from the Embody Aspect ability, while Raghav, they do get the free Fake Out onto Incineroar from Gio's side, and Surging Strikes connects with the Incineroar and is going to pick up that KO in 2.
Oh, that's a huge knockout here. Gio now is down to his last 2 Pokemon, going to have to commit to 1 attack with this Golden Go for the rest of the match. And, Urshifu, definitely not the sort of Pokemon you typically expect to thrive in Trick Room, but able to really drive the offense for Gio so far, almost all the way back to full health thanks to this Steel Terastallization. And this is starting to look pretty good. Could this be the revenge arc?
This is really close to being the revenge arc for Raghav. You can see that Raghav knows that they are so close to making it to day 2. Just a couple more KOs. Urshifu protects itself. The worst thing that could happen is that Urshifu going down right now, while Gio just goes for Follow Me on the Ogerpon, protecting Golden Go. Incineroar on the offensive with a Flare Blitz deals a good amount of damage, all things considered, to that Ogerpon, and it takes the recoil damage, and now we see what Golden Go has been forced to lock into, and it is Shadow Ball that will connect into the Protect.
Yeah, I mean, not Geo's ideal attack here, but what else are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
Too many Pokemon resist, make it rain, so that's not really viable. I don't know how you're ever going to knock out this Urshifu if you lock in a Power Gem, and now Trick Room expires, so potentially this Urshifu, the fastest Pokemon on the field, and staring down some Pokemon I'm sure it'd just love to do some damage to.
Yeah, gonna have to deal some damage right back. This Ogerpon actually kind of threatening, at least the 2 Pokemon on field. Urshifu has lost its water resistance, and Ogerpon, with the ability to get critical hits with Ivy Cudgel and with the Terrestrialization boost, will be able to deal a decent amount of damage, but of course, the Rillaboom in the back will be able to instantly threaten that Pokemon as soon as either of these Pokemon on the field for Raghav go down.
And this time, Raghav is the one who has the unrevealed 4th Pokemon, right? I think there's most of the remaining Pokemon, I think, are reasonable options. I think it's most likely not Landorus, but either of the other 2 it could definitely be. So Geo having to plan around a lot of scenarios with this tournament life on the line.
Well, tournament life on the line. Ivy Cudgel from Ogerpon into Urshifu, not enough to pick up the KO. And Urshifu is faster than Golden Go. Gets a 1 hit on the Surging Strikes, gets 2 hits on the Surging Strikes onto Golden Go. And Golden Go is able to just barely hold on all 3 hits of the Surging Strikes, which means it will be able to fire back with a Shadow Ball. Finally picking up the KO on that Urshifu, but Incineroar did not switch, did not pivot. That means that Incineroar gets to, from the top rope, go for an attack here and pick up a KO on that Golden Go with the Flare Blitz, meaning that it is just the Wellspring Ogerpon up against Incineroar, and we know that there is Rillaboom in the back, and there is a 4th Pokemon, and that is going to be so difficult for this Wellspring Ogerpon to come back from. The Rillaboom is low, but we also just saw the final Pokemon is the Hearthflame Ogerpon, and Raghav looking to make good on the revenge arc. Came to the finals in San Antonio, but now advancing to day 2 in Vancouver.
Yeah, this feels pretty ice. Go for the fake out, the pivot. You get to bring Incineroar back in. Geo realizes what's happening, and Raghav able to pick that one up. What a great match. Wow.
Incredible set. You know, sometimes we see some of these matches and we say, oh, that could have been a finals. You know, that match could have been a finals. That match was a finals in San Antonio, and that is exactly why both of these trainers are extremely skilled. They are so good at this game.